Okay, so we're going to be waxing the snowboard with iron wax, aka hand wax. I'm just going to go over kind of the basics of what you need to do to successfully wax your snowboard or skis. We'll start with a snowboard and then I'll move to skis in a different video. Really the difference with the skis is you have to deal with the binding brakes, where snowboard you don't have the brakes to deal with. So first off, I'm plugging our iron here. And this iron is a Swix T77. And I usually set my iron temperature to be about 120 or 125-ish or so. But it really depends on the temperature of the room and the type of wax you're using. And I'm just going to use a standard CH8 wax. That's kind of standard for the Pacific Northwest area where I live. We usually get a lot of temperatures around freezing level or just above freezing. And so that's the recommended wax there. You can also do like a universal wax, which is usually like a white color. So we'll let this heat up. You can kind of see here the indicator light as it's heating up. I'm going to wait for that to flick off, or sometimes I might get a little bit of smoking going on. That'll just tell me that the iron is hot enough to accept wax. I'm also going to show you guys how to make sure your iron face here is nice and cleaned off before getting started, because we don't want to start scoring the base of the ski or snowboard with anything that might be left on there. Okay, so that was pretty quick. So it's already heated up there. One other little prep thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take the Scotch-Brite pad. I'm just going to check for burrs along the edges. We're not doing the edges on this board today. And I'm just going to kind of rub the Scotch-Brite there. This will also take off like some surface rust and would prevent any unnecessary edging of the snowboard, because, you know, every time you edge a snowboard, you take a little bit of the metal off with it. So, you know, if it's like little bits of surface rust, you can usually get a lot of it off with Scotch-Brite. You can also take like a file and use the file to take the burrs down. I don't really see any burrs on here, but you can just gently rub a file along the edge. You can also kind of feel for it, but just be careful. You don't want to get a burr in your finger. That is like the worst feeling, trying to get that thing out. But I don't see any burrs there. And just take the Scotch-Brite pad here, and it's a good habit, especially on skis, go from tip to tail. So I have the tip here and the tail's there. On snowboard, since you go both directions, it's not as critical, but on skis, most time you're going with the tips going first. This was definitely overdue for wax, and you'll start seeing, it's kind of hard with the graphics, but you'll start seeing like this area here along the edges. You'll see that start to kind of turn white and foggy. That just means that the base is low on wax and it's time to get your board waxed or skis waxed. So you can use like a base cleaner and clean, basically it will take off any old wax and it'll strip it down to just the base. And also take off any of the grime, and you don't want that grime to be on your iron. And so when you're doing your iron on the board here, anything that's on the board like dirt and other grime will end up on your iron. You don't want that. So we're going to get started here. I'm going to start out with this little bit. We're going to just drip the wax onto the snowboard here, and we'll get a nice even coat. And I'm going to go, there's no reason to go all the way down to the tip or all the way down to the bottom of the tail, because that is not going to contact the snow. Your main point of contact is going to be right here on the base. So basically kind of right here. I mean, I can do a little bit lower, but it's kind of unnecessary. It's more cosmetic at that point. Be generous with the wax. Also, another tip too, try to get the bindings out of the way. You don't want to drip that onto the binding. It's just more work to clean up. Nice and heavy on here. You can always add more wax, but you definitely don't want to have too little wax, because it will start to score up the base otherwise, and you can overheat the base if you don't have enough wax on there. One thing I didn't go over, because I did it while I was off video, I just took some wax and kind of just dripped it onto, you know, some tile or a piece of scrap wood, just to get any little bits and pieces off of my wax or off my iron. But I store this thing in a box, try to keep it nice and clean, so gunk doesn't collect on it. It would just be gunk from a different board if it wasn't fully cleaned off. Okay, so now we got plenty of wax on the board. You do not want to stop the iron at any point. So you always want to keep the iron moving. You don't want to overheat part of the base. In a snowboard, you can't just do it in one pass. You're going to have to kind of scooch over. Avoid like circular motion as much as possible because you don't want to get, if there is something on the board or something on the ski, or sorry, yeah, ski or the iron, if you make circular motions and there's like a chunk of the edging or something like that, it's going to make a circular scratch in the ski. So you want to try to stay as front to back as possible. A little circular motion is okay, but you don't want to do a lot of it. The idea for the circular motion, like just a little bit, like maybe like that, is you're spreading the wax across the board. But I try to drip it. See, like there's a little bit right here where I didn't have much on there. I try to keep this on contact too. I just try to move some of the wax from like the inside of the board to the outside. But like I said, I don't try to make a bunch of circular patterns. I just try to move the wax evenly. Now, some people must say, now, since you're applying wax on the snowboard and you get it on the edge, you have to make sure you get all the wax off the edges. And I would say that's true for, you know, if you're going to store it, because the wax could trap moisture in between the wax and the edge and cause your edges to rust. But for the most part, it's going to come off as soon as you start riding. It's just going to flake off. So that's more of an aesthetic thing. So, I mean, I'll do that. You know, if cosmetics is really a thing for me, but not, I mean, for me, I don't really care. It's going to come off as soon as you ride it. So we got this all evenly applied. I'm going to just do a nice pass like this. And basically, I'm just knocking down any high spots on the snowboard where wax could have collected. And that'll just make scraping it easier. And I'll just get that all the way down the edge there. Do the same thing here. You don't want to go super slow with this, because you don't want to overheat the base. And there you have it. Now, one thing to note with snowboards, you don't have to deal with the skis. Where the bindings are on the board, those plates that hold the binding tend to suck in the base. So actually like suck it up, or I guess in this case, since it's flipped over, it sucks it down. So there might be extra areas where wax will collect because it's like a low spot. That's just the nature of snowboards. And that's why I like using this smaller scraper versus one for snowboards where it goes all the way across, because with this I can really get in those low spots and get a nice, because you want to have it nice and even. You don't want to have extra wax in these areas. And that's probably, you know, you may have noticed on the slope, you know, there's like 2 white spots on the snowboard, and that's because there's excess wax in those areas because of the divots. Now that's different than white spots along the edges. That would mean it's low on wax. You need to take it to your local ski shop and have them wax it, or just do it at home now that I'm teaching you how to do it. So we're gonna let this sit for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll come and scrape it off once it's cooled down enough. And you can kind of use like the back of your hand, and you can feel the heat. I can still feel heat here. If you got a heat gun, you can use that, but most time, you know, I'm just gonna do this, see if there's any heat. But usually it takes about 15-20 minutes to let it kind of soak into the base. One of the advantages of iron wax over like going down and getting a belt wax is the iron will open up the pores of the ski or snowboard, and then it will absorb the wax a lot better than just a hot belt. A hot belt doesn't give the base enough of a chance to heat up, and so the wax doesn't get absorbed as well. It'll heat up enough to get the wax, you know, I mean, basically the wax gets applied onto the belt, and so the wax is plenty warm, so the wax just gets applied on the top, but it doesn't get a chance to absorb really well into the snowboard or ski. So I'll come back here in about 15 minutes or so, and we'll start scraping. Okay, so it's been about 15 minutes or so. The base is nice and cold, so ready to start scraping here. I recommend doing this in a garage or some, you know, I don't want it to be super cold, but it's because it'll take longer. But somewhere you can sweep the stuff outside or into a garbage can. I got a concrete floor here in my shop, so I'm just gonna scrape it onto the floor and clean it up later. Key with this, you don't want to push down into the board. You want to push more with the most of the force going down toward the tail. So naturally, this plexi scraper is going to want to push a little bit into the board, and that's fine. I also try to avoid hitting your edges because it will start to mess up your bottom of your scraper there. There are tools that you can, like, basically, you know, you clamp it there and you go like this, and it would, you know, redo the edge on the bottom of the scraper here. You can also use a little bit of sandpaper, like a fine grit. This one's already ready to go, so just get a little bit of this guy here. And you want to go the same direction. You want to go from tip to tail. So we're starting here at the tip. And like my technique, I like putting both my thumbs right here. That will give a nice even push across. And some will say, well, why are you scraping the board? You just put wax on there and now you're taking it off. Well, we don't need all this extra wax. The wax that is bonded to the board is not going to leave with the scraping here. I'm going to knock this transition down there. You also don't want to have the wax collect too much in the tip or the tail either. Sometimes there's extra deposits there. So you want to get that nice and scraped up. And we'll come in here with a nylon brush and clean this up. So, oh, here you can see it. This is, see, conveniently right where the binding is. You can see that the wax kind of pooled up there. It's kind of hard to see here just because of the graphic, but you can really see it there. And you do a little extra pressure there. You see now it's coming off. It's easier to see this wax because it's, you know, a red wax on a blue base there. You don't want that binding up there either. So in areas like that, you have to put a little bit of downforce. You don't have to put a bunch. You don't need to put your weight into it. Just remember, like, most of the direction that you want to put the pressure is that way toward the tail. My workbench isn't the best, but it's what I usually use because I'm always on the go. So sometimes it's not in my shop. It's somewhere else. So if you do it on, I mean, I like this. It was an old card table, and the top got trashed, and so I ended up just knocking the top out so I could have room, see, to put the bindings there and not have it get in the way of the table. If you have a hard table, you can get like 4x4 blocks and wrap some carpet around it and put them on each side of the binding. Basically, you just need to have the bindings up off of the table so you can have the board sit flat. You know, if you do the card table method, I used an old water noodle and cut it in half there to get it to go around the post, and it was perfect size there. So here you can see like extra wax there building up where we kind of had that deposit at the end. So we just want to make sure that's all scraped up. Like I said, you want to be careful that you don't have anything sharp on the edge there, like burrs or whatnot, because it will start digging into your plexi scraper. So try to avoid the edges if you can. But I personally like using a shorter, you know, this way plexi scraper, just so I can get into these areas that, you know, I normally couldn't get into. I like to go all the way down to the tail. And then I'll go back one more time and go tip the tail. The longer the stroke too, the faster you'll get the board done and the less effort you have to put into it. If you do these really short strokes like this, you're gonna be here a long time, and it's not necessary. You know, take a longer stroke like that, you're moving more of the wax across the board. You know, the excess wax that are peeling off, you're moving that stuff a lot faster. See, there's still a little bit of high spots here. Move my board here. Yeah, see, and there again, a little bit of excess wax, I can feel it. It'll kind of get bound up. just conveniently right where that binding is. And that's just a thing that snowboards have in common. I've seen it on almost every snowboard. That sound you're hearing is not the edge scraping on the scraper. It's the wax I'm peeling up. It's probably really hard to see on the camera, but I can see it with the naked eye here with the lighting. It's good to do this if you have adequate lighting. It's really hard to do it if you don't have good lighting. Then you're just going by feel, which I can do a pretty good job. I've waxed enough skis and snowboards to be able to do that, but I always like having extra light because then it's easier to just get it done. Get the extra stuff off of here. If you do that, try to do it on wood or a soft surface on your scraper there. So now we're going to take this Swix nylon brush, get the rest of that off there, and we're just going to get a little bit extra wax there I missed. And just remember, it's really tempting to go like this, you know, but it's important that you go tip of tail. So you'll take your nylon brush here. I say medium pressure. You don't need to like really push into it. This is gonna just buff out the wax, give it a nice polished finish. Focus on the tip and tail, because that's where the extra wax is gonna build up. Now, if you're doing this quite a bit, they do make a drill attachment that can go in a cordless drill or a regular corded drill called a roto brush. Now I'll basically have a wheel with these on it. You can have like horsehair, you have like a regular nylon brush, and they all have a different kind of finish to it depending on what wax you're using and what kind of fine finish you want. And you basically would just sit there at the drill and you have a handle on this side, and you would just work from the tip down the tail. So you would just go down with it, lift it up, and then, you know, work your way down. And if you do a good job scraping, there's not going to be a bunch of wax to need to polish off there. Same thing, you're going to go from tip to tail. So I'm just going through here, kind of cleaning stuff up. Sometimes I notice like some other areas, like I'm looking like right here might be a little bit areas, yep, I need to knock that down there a little bit, maybe there. And I don't feel anything there, but I'm just gonna do one more pass with this scraper there. Gonna get this extra stuff off of here. It's looking better now. That's looking good. Then we'll take the nylon brush here and just do one final pass. Sometimes you can press the wax chunks into the base, which is okay. As soon as it gets ridden, that'll come right off. This is more of a cosmetic thing at that point. And I'd say this is done and ready to be ridden. So that's how you would do a hand wax or an iron wax, as they call it, on a snowboard. Like, subscribe, comment with questions, or if you have any tips on how you would wax your snowboard at home. And look forward to having you guys follow me on YouTube.